Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff, heart racing, knowing that what lies ahead is uncertain, and yet you step forward. That moment, that leap, is vulnerability. It's terrifying, yes, but it's also where transformation begins. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's raw, unfiltered strength. It's the courage to show up when we can't control the outcome. Think about it, the times we've dared to say, I need help, I love you, or I don't know. Those moments, though uncomfortable, are the ones that define us. We often armor ourselves, thinking if we just hide our struggles or flaws, we'll be safe. But here's the truth: the more we protect ourselves, the more disconnected we become from others, and even from ourselves. Connection requires authenticity, and authenticity demands vulnerability. Shame thrives in silence, but vulnerability shines a light on it. When we share our stories, the messy, imperfect parts, we discover we're not alone. And in that sharing, shame begins to lose its power. Here's the thing: we will fail, we'll fall short. But vulnerability reminds us that failure isn't the end. It's an invitation to learn, to grow, and to try again. Each time we face our fears, we build resilience and courage. And when we open up, we create space for something extraordinary: empathy. Empathy connects us. It allows us to say, I see you, I hear you. Me too. It's a bridge built from shared humanity. So let's not run from vulnerability. Let's lean into it. Because in those moments of uncertainty and risk, we find our truest selves, and we create the life, relationships, and world we've been yearning for. Vulnerability isn't easy, but it's worth it. It's powerful. And it's where our courage begins. When we think of courage, we often imagine heroic acts: someone running into a burning building, standing up to injustice, or facing an overwhelming challenge with unwavering strength. But if we peel back the layers of those moments, what lies at their core? Vulnerability. Every act of true courage begins with a willingness to step into uncertainty, risk, or emotional exposure. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear, acknowledging the discomfort, and choosing to show up anyway. Vulnerability is the precursor to that choice. It's the voice inside us saying, I don't know how this will turn out, but I'm willing to try. It's the leap of faith we take when the path ahead is unclear. Think about the first time you tried something new: a job interview, a speech, or even saying I love you for the first time. Your heart likely pounded, your hands may have trembled, and a voice inside might have whispered, what if this doesn't work out? But you did it anyway. That's courage born out of vulnerability. You stepped forward without a guarantee of success, and in doing so, you found strength you might not have realized you had. Courage rooted in vulnerability isn't flashy. It's often quiet and deeply personal. It's the single parent asking for help. It's the student raising their hand to admit they don't understand. It's the entrepreneur pitching an idea that might fail. It's the artist sharing their work with the world, knowing it might be criticized. These are not acts of weakness, they are acts of immense bravery. Our culture often tells us to be strong, which is too often interpreted as don't let them see you struggle. But here's the paradox: the more we try to shield ourselves from vulnerability, the less access we have to our courage. Armor may protect us, but it also separates us, keeping us from connection, growth, and the fulfillment that comes from showing up authentically. Vulnerability is about embracing the truth of who we are, our fears, hopes, and imperfections, and allowing that truth to be seen. It's saying, I am enough even when I don't have all the answers. And when we dare to do that, we open ourselves to incredible possibilities. It's important to acknowledge that vulnerability is not without its risks. We may fail, we may be hurt. But vulnerability isn't about avoiding pain, it's about facing it with courage and grace. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we build resilience. Each time we show up, we grow stronger, more compassionate, and more connected to ourselves and others. In the end, vulnerability and courage are inextricably linked. You cannot have one without the other. So the next time you feel the pull to retreat, to hide, or to avoid taking that leap, remember this courage doesn't mean you're fearless, it means you're willing to act despite the fear. And that willingness born out of vulnerability is where true strength lies. Vulnerability isn't easy, it isn't comfortable, but it is transformative, and it is, without a doubt, the birthplace of courage. In a world that often celebrates perfection, it's easy to fall into the trap of presenting a polished, curated version of ourselves. Social media, professional environments, and even personal relationships can sometimes feel like stages where we're expected to perform, highlighting only our achievements, strengths, and carefully edited stories. But the truth is, meaningful connection doesn't grow in the soil of perfection. It grows in the messy, unfiltered, and real moments of authenticity. When we show up as our true selves, we invite others to do the same. Authenticity is the courage to say, this is me, not the version I think you want, but the version I really am. It's being honest about our struggles, our fears, and our imperfections. And when we allow ourselves to be seen in this way, we create the conditions for connection to flourish. Think about the moments when you felt deeply connected to someone. Chances are those moments didn't come from rehearsed conversations or perfectly timed smiles. They came from shared vulnerability, perhaps an unexpected laugh during a mistake, a tear shed over a heartfelt story, or the relief of hearing someone say, I feel that way too. These moments remind us that we're not alone in our experiences, and they build bridges between our hearts. Authenticity requires us to let go of the masks we wear. It challenges the belief that we need to be perfect to be loved. Instead, it says, I am enough. Just as I am. When we embody this mindset, we make space for others to feel the same. It's an unspoken permission slip that says, you don't have to pretend here. You're safe to be yourself. This doesn't mean authenticity is easy. It can feel vulnerable and even risky to let down our guard, especially in a culture that often equates vulnerability with weakness. But authenticity is where connection starts. It's in the moments when we say, I don't have all the answers, I made a mistake, or I need help. It's in the unpolished truths that allow others to see us for who we really are, and in turn, feel safe enough to share their truths too. Authenticity also strengthens connection because it fosters trust. When we present a facade, people sense it. There's an unspoken awareness that something isn't quite real, and it creates distance. But when we're authentic, we build trust. People know they're not engaging with a performance, they're engaging with a person. And trust is the foundation of any meaningful relationship, whether personal or professional. Authenticity doesn't mean sharing everything with everyone. It means being true to yourself in a way that feels aligned with your values and honoring the relationships where vulnerability is reciprocated. It's about listening to that inner voice that tells you when you're holding back and having the courage to lean into what feels real, even if it's uncomfortable. Shame is a powerful force. It tells us we are not enough, not smart enough, not successful enough, not lovable enough. It thrives in the shadows, feeding on secrecy, silence, and judgment. When we allow shame to remain hidden, it grows stronger, weaving itself into our thoughts and shaping the way we see ourselves. But shame cannot survive when it is exposed to the light. And that light is vulnerability. Vulnerability is the act of stepping into the discomfort of being seen, our flaws, fears, and imperfections laid bare. While shame tells us to hide, to cover up, to pretend, vulnerability invites us to speak, to share, and to connect. It's in the moments when we say, I feel this way, I've struggled with this, or I made a mistake, that we begin to loosen shame's grip on our lives. When we open up about our experiences, we often discover something extraordinary: we're not alone. Shame isolates us, convincing us that our struggles are unique and that no one else could possibly understand. But when we share our truths, we find others who say, me too. In that shared humanity, the power of shame begins to dissipate. Vulnerability creates space for empathy and understanding, and those are the antidotes to shame. Shame is rooted in fear, the fear of rejection, of judgment, of being unworthy of love and belonging. But when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we challenge that fear. We take the risk of being seen as we are, and in doing so, we reclaim our worth. Vulnerability says, I am more than my mistakes. I am more than my struggles. I am enough. It's important to recognize that vulnerability isn't about oversharing or seeking validation. It's about choosing to share our stories with people who've earned the right to hear them. It's about creating spaces where we can be honest and real and where we can trust that our vulnerability will be met with compassion rather than judgment. When we speak our shame out loud, it loses its ability to control us. Naming it, sharing it, and allowing others to witness it diminishes its power. Shame thrives on the belief that if people really knew us, they wouldn't accept us. But vulnerability proves that belief wrong over and over again. It shows us that our worthiness isn't tied to perfection, but to our willingness to show up, to be seen, and to embrace our humanity. Failure is one of life's most misunderstood teachers. In a culture that prizes success, achievement, and perfection, failure is often seen as a sign of inadequacy, something to be avoided at all costs. But the truth is, failure isn't the opposite of success, it's an essential part of it. It's the bridge between who we are and who we are becoming. To embrace failure as part of the journey is to embrace growth, resilience, and possibility. When we fail, it's easy to feel defeated, to let the weight of disappointment settle on our shoulders. But failure is rarely the end of the story. In fact, it's often the very moment when our most significant learning begins. Each failure carries with it a lesson, a chance to reflect, recalibrate, and try again with greater clarity and purpose. It's through failure that we develop grit and the courage to persist, even when the road ahead is uncertain. Failure challenges us to examine what we truly value and why we're pursuing certain goals. It asks us to confront our fears and insecurities, and in doing so, it helps us grow not just in skill, but in character. Failure strips away the illusion of perfection and reminds us of our humanity. And in that humanity, we discover humility, empathy, and a deeper understanding of ourselves and others. Some of the most successful and inspiring people in history face failure repeatedly before reaching their goals. Thomas Edison famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Each of those failures was a stepping stone to one of the most revolutionary inventions in human history. Similarly, J.K. Rowling's manuscript for Harry Potter was rejected by numerous publishers before becoming a global phenomenon. These stories remind us that failure is not the end, it's a chapter in the larger story of our lives. When we fear failure, we often hold ourselves back from taking risks or pursuing dreams. We stay in our comfort zones, choosing safety over possibility. But growth doesn't happen in the comfort zone. It happens in the moments when we dare to stretch, to try, to push ourselves beyond what we thought was possible. And in those moments, failure becomes a necessary part of the process, a marker that we're challenging ourselves and striving for something meaningful. Failure also teaches us resilience, the ability to bounce back after setbacks. Resilience isn't about avoiding failure, it's about learning how to rise after falling. Each time we get back up, we build strength and confidence in our ability to handle life's challenges. Failure becomes less of a roadblock and more of a stepping stone. Importantly, failure fosters creativity and innovation. When things don't go as planned, we're forced to think differently, to adapt, and to come up with new solutions. Many of the world's greatest breakthroughs emerge not in spite of failure, but because of it. Failure pushes us to explore paths we might not have considered otherwise, unlocking potential we didn't know we had. Failure also has a way of bringing clarity to what truly matters. When we experience failure, it often strips away the superficial and leaves us face to face with our deepest values and passions. It reminds us why we started the journey in the first place and reignites our commitment to keep going. It's crucial to reframe our understanding of failure not as a mark of inadequacy, but as evidence that we're trying, that we're daring to dream and to act. Failure means we're in the arena, showing up, taking risks, and doing the work. And that is something to be celebrated, not feared. Vulnerability at its core is the act of opening ourselves up, exposing our innermost fears, struggles, and truths. It's a deeply human experience, but one that often feels risky. The fear of judgment or rejection can make vulnerability seem like a solitary act. But when vulnerability is met with empathy, something remarkable happens. It becomes a bridge, turning raw exposure into profound connection. Empathy is the ability to step into someone else's shoes, to feel with them rather than for them. It's a shared emotional resonance that says, I may not know exactly what you're going through, but I'm here with you in it. Empathy meets vulnerability with understanding and compassion, creating a space where people feel seen, heard, and valued. When we share our vulnerabilities, whether it's a struggle we're facing, a fear we're carrying, or a dream we're chasing, we're taking a leap of faith. That leap is grounded in the hope that someone will catch us with kindness, not criticism. Empathy is what turns that hope into reality. It's the act of holding space for someone's story without rushing to fix it, judge it, or dismiss it. It's a quiet affirmation that says, you're not alone in this. Empathy transforms vulnerability by breaking down barriers. It allows people to move beyond surface level interactions and into a space of mutual understanding. It's in these moments that we realize we're more alike than we are different. Vulnerability can feel isolating, but empathy reminds us that our experiences are part of the shared human condition. When we respond to vulnerability with empathy, we also create an environment of trust. Trust is built when people know they can bring their whole selves, their joys, fears, and imperfections into a relationship without fear of being dismissed or misunderstood. Empathy strengthens that trust by ensuring that vulnerability is met with care and respect. Empathy also deepens connection by fostering reciprocal vulnerability. When someone's openness is met with genuine empathy, it often inspires the same in return. This back and forth exchange creates a cycle of trust and understanding where both people feel safe enough to share and supported enough to listen. It's in this cycle that the most meaningful and enduring connections are formed. In moments of vulnerability, it's easy to feel exposed or uncertain. Empathy doesn't erase that uncertainty, but it does create a sense of safety within it. It's the anchor that holds us steady when we take emotional risks. Empathy doesn't require us to have the answers or solve the problem. It simply asks us to be present, to bear witness, and to affirm the courage it takes to be vulnerable. Through empathy, vulnerability becomes a source of strength rather than a liability. It transforms fear into trust, isolation into connection, and uncertainty into mutual understanding. Empathy validates the humanity in each of us, creating a foundation where true connection can thrive. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is the birthplace of courage, connection, and authenticity. It invites us to step into the discomfort of being seen as we truly are. And in doing so, it transforms our lives and our relationships. When we embrace vulnerability, we find the courage to show up, the strength to face failure, and the resilience to rise again. Through vulnerability, we deepen our connections with others, finding authenticity in shared experiences and understanding and empathy. It is in the moments when we risk being real, sharing our fears, flaws, and hopes that we discover the transformative power of human connection. Shame, which thrives in secrecy, loses its hold when we shine the light of vulnerability on it. Failure, often feared, becomes a stepping stone to growth and success. And when vulnerability is met with empathy, it forges bonds that are genuine and lasting. The power of vulnerability lies not in avoiding pain or imperfection, but in embracing them as part of the journey. It is through this embrace that we unlock our true potential and step into the fullness of our humanity. So let us lean into vulnerability not as something to fear, but as the very foundation of courage, connection, and transformation.